Okay, today we're going to be talking about the oracles of Sibyl, the Sibylline, the Sibylline Oracles, and these were allegedly utterances of Sibyl, uh, which of course is a legendary Greek pagan prophetess of the Oracle of Apollo, whose ecstatic revelations were divined in a frenzied state. It is definitely a valuable source of information for classical mythology, oftentimes denouncing Rome's idolatry and actions and so forth. But that's really a mixture of things. Mixture in the sense that there are layers, various layers. For example, there is a pagan layer, and then there are other layers and interpretations beyond that. There are various versions of it. Of course, we have a Jewish version, which becomes into a Christian version. So what do we do with these oracles, right? What do we do with these oracles? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to have to do this in a way that's much like a mystery. In fact, the oracles of Sibyl, what happens is this. What happens is that going through these materials, and I've gone through it quite a bit. What I've noticed is that there's not a clear way to describe these oracles. They're all over the place. And what I want to do is I want to take this step by step, inch by inch. And I know that at the very end, you're going to understand these oracles better than some of the literature and some of the academic works that claim to try to encompass these ideas. But I found many contradictions. So let's just start right at the beginning with the word Sibyl. Let's start there, right? So first of all, there are various theories of what this word means. One theory is that it is a proper name of an individual female seer. But maybe. But that definition has been argued since antiquity. It's a point of frequent debate. For example, Pausanias argues about it. A second theory is that the origin of the word Sibyl, as provided by Varro, is actually a combination. It has a Greek etymology and arrives from the word seos, which can be a derivative of theos, right? Which of course obviously is God, and bula, right? Bula becoming, of course, bula meaning counsel, and so it becomes Sibylla, which means counsel of the gods. So you're receiving special counsel or advice from the gods. I kind of like that one. The third theory is that the word Sibyl is, according to modern philologists, say that the word is derived from an ancient Italian dialect. I don't like that one, and it doesn't make any sense because why would it be an Italian dialect when the earliest instances that we have of it are going back to the Greeks? I mean, it's mentioned by Heraclitus of Ephesus, and it's mentioned by Aristophanes. It's mentioned by Plato. So no, I say no to that, but whatever. The fourth theory is that the word Sibyl has a Semitic background. Now, so many scholars will say that the Sibyl origins, come from Babylon, come from the Middle East. And where do we get this from a Semitic standpoint? Well, you have the word Sib, and you have, of course, this idea of ancient, and alal, right, which means God. So it could mean the ancient of God. Words, who knows? So these are the traditions, right? Kind of floating around there, but I'm kind of with Barrow on this one, but it's whatever you wish. Now, the tradition regarding the Sibyl probably originated in the various ecstatic movements that comes from Asia. And as they move into the archaic Western Asia Minor, and then, of course, it spread with the Greeks. the Sibyl is first mentioned by name in Heraclitus of Ephesus. By the way, one of my favorite philosophers. He's the obscure. You can't step in the same river twice. That guy. Zeus is Zeus, but he is one, and all that kind of interesting parts. He lived from 535 to 475, and he says this. This is a great quote, and I want to take some time to say it. He says, "The Sibyl, with frenzied mouth, uttering things not to be laughed at, unadorned and unperfumed, yet reaches to 1,000 years with her voice by aid of the gods." Oh, wow. I mean, that's a great, the Sibyl, frenzied mouth, right? Uttering things not to be laughed at, right? You have to take it very, very serious, right? Unadorned and unperfumed. So it's raw, it's direct, right? It's honest, yet reaches to 1,000 years with their voice by aid of the God, right? So the idea is that is that it foresees what's going to happen 1,000 years from now. One of you who are listening saying unperfumed, that's got to be blasphemy, Unperfumed means there's nothing cosmetic to it. It's just plain and simple. But I'm thinking maybe the Sibyl could have wore perfume, but there you have it, right? So, and the interesting thing is that this early quote does match a quote of who the Sibyl is all the way into late antiquity. That's made by a certain guy by the name of Iamblichus. Iamblichus, we'll be hearing a lot about Iamblichus next week in the Chaldean Oracles. Apparently, I'm very much into oracles right now. Iamblichus, who lived from 250 to 325, says as follows. He likewise explains the same ecstatic behavior on behalf of the Sibyl. He says as follows, in like manner, many also come to a perception of the future through enthusiastic rapture and a divine impulse, when at the same time so thoroughly awake as to have the senses in full activity. Nevertheless, they by no means follow the matter closely, or at least they do not attend to it as closely as when in their ordinary condition. So basically, they are not asleep. They are fully awake, and yet they're caught up in this sense of rapture, this sense of ecstasy as they speak. So thus, for the seer or the Pythia or the Sibyl, or even possibly the prophet, right? The realization of these oracles, these prophecies, are often accompanied by ecstatic manifestations, while very wide awake, very alert, with all the senses seemingly engaged in the pursuit or reception of these spiritual messages. They are fully involved. They are completely there, aware, right? So, so what happens now is that's the first reference to it, right? And then, of course, the last one. So we have the beginning and the end, and supposedly there. So after Heraclitus, though, so after Heraclitus of Ephesus, 535 to 475, again, is his lifetime. It's that next mentioned by Aristophanes in his work known as The Peace. It's kind of a funny little episode. It's these guys that are making offerings to the gods and trying to do the proper way, and libations first or the meat first. And they kind of get in an argument with each other, and so about what the order is. And Heracles says, "What oracle ordered you to burn these mutton in honor of the gods?" And he's asking this question, and this guy by the name of Trigenius says, the grand oracle of Homer. And he starts quoting Homer. And, Heracles says, "I care little for that. 'Tis not the Sibyl who spoke it." And so we have here this idea that the Sibyl has more authority when it comes to even the proper way of doing rituals to the gods, even that over Homer, at least according to Heracles. But it's just interesting because Heracles and Tigranes, they kind of get into this fight going back and forth, and so the very end, what happens is that Tigranes says, well, I want you to, what is it? Oh yeah, here's this. He says, you go eat the Sibyl. Because he's getting impatient about he's like, I want you, we need to have the meat now, we need to sacrifice, use the meat offering right now. And the guy says, oh, just go eat the Sibyl. Like, that's enough. So they obviously don't agree, but you can see that she is in a position of authority. Of course, Plato will mention the Sibyl in his Phaedrus. Aristotle will mention the Sibyl in his Problems, 954. But by this point, it's not one Sibyl anymore, it's many Sibyls. So it's a pleroma of Sibyls, too many Sibyls going around. Okay, so what happens now is that by the time we get to the 1st century BCE, Varro lists 10 Sibyls. 10 Sibyls. So what are we going to do with the Sibylline Oracles? So what are we going to do with that? Because we have, which one are we going to follow? I mean, you got 10 of them. You got the Persian Sibyl, you got the Libyan Sybil, you got the Delphic Sybil, you got the Cimmerian Sybil, you got the Erythraean Sybil, you got the Samian Sybil from Samos, you got the Cumaean Sybil, you got the Hellespontine, which is the Trojan Sybil, you have the Phrygian Sybil from Ankara, and you have the Tiburtine Sybil. That's from Tivoli, north of Rome. So you have all of these Sibyls, and you're thinking, do we have to go through these Sibyls? Yes, we do. It's like, well, we want to just focus on the one that's connected to the oracles. Guess what? In one way or the other, these will all be related. And I'll just give you a quick preview, just quickly. So you're going to have, one version coming from 3 of these Sibyls. And then what happens is that these oracles are destroyed, and they kind of clamber around and they gather information from these other Sibyls, and they put together yet another version. Yeah, so yes, we do have to go through these. So here we go. Okay, so let's talk with the Persian Sibyl. The Persian Sibyl is really shrouded in mystery. It's known by different names. Sometimes it's known as the Sambethe, the Helorea, or the Saba. According to Pausanias, his 2nd century writer, he refers to the Sibyl as a Saba. Now, this is what's interesting about this, and this is really important. So important, I'm going to have a glass of water. And that is, this Persian Sibyl is sometimes identified as being one and the same with the Hebrew Sibyl. Yes, a Hebrew Sibyl. So here we go. So Pausanias states, there grew up amongst the Hebrews above Palestine a woman who gave oracles named Saba, whose father was Borasus and her mother was Ermante. Some say she was a Babylonian, while others call her an Egyptian Sibyl. Okay, so it's interesting because the word Saba, if you guys know the Semitic roots, right? It's derived from the Aramaic Saba, which actually means old, right? So it makes sense, since the Sibyls, who are always connected to women, right? It's always women, right? Are women of great age, really great age in many ways, right? So there you have this, right? In fact, what will happen is that this Sibyl, this attribution, will eventually go into the Jewish form of the Sibylline Oracles. So you're going to see that happening, and as the possible originator. In fact, it is said that that she is connected to, in Jewish belief, connected to Noah in some ways. Okay. Now, according to Nicander, this Persian Sibyl prophesied the rival of Alexander the Great. So and there you have other parts too here. In Jewish tradition, she is asserted as belonging to the 6th generation of man and to be a descendant from Noah. Although in other places, she is connected to be the wife of one of Noah's sons, right? Epiphanius regards her as the daughter of Noah himself, or even of, get this, of Eve. Now, the Jewish Sibyl, however, was basically has a deliberately falsifies genealogy. But trying to get as old as possible, trying to compete with the other pagan perspectives. But there you have it. And there's also these ideas that she's connected to the ancient Chaldeans. So that's this one. So we have, even though at first she will have nothing to do with the oracles that we talk about later on, she will eventually be very important. So just kind of mark that in your mind, just going, okay, so we're done with one of them. The Libyan Sybil. The Libyan Sybil is connected to the oracle of Zeus of Ammon at a place known as Siwa. And her name is Phimono. What happens is that many Greeks, again, including Pausanias, believe the Libyan Sybil was the daughter of Zeus and Lamia, who was also the daughter of Poseidon, but who was also connected to the Oracle of Delphi, as well as the Oracle of Delos. Anyway, so what happens is, I'm going to go ahead and read this reference here. There is a rock rising up above the ground. This is Pausanias. On it, says the Delphians, there stood enchanted the oracles of a woman by the name of Hierophile and surnamed Sibyl. The former Sibyl, I find, was at present as any. The Greeks say that she was the daughter of Zeus by Lamia, daughter of Poseidon, that she was the first woman to chant oracles, and that the name Sibyl was given to her by the Libyans. Serapion, in his epic verses, says that this Libyan Sibyl says as follows. He says, even when dead, talking about the Sibyl, she ceased not from divination. According to Clement of Alexandria, Serapion said that what preceded from her into the air after her death was what gave oracle utterances in voice and omens. And on her body being changed into earth, and the grass as natural growing out of it, whatever beasts happening to be in that place fed on it, exhibited to men an accurate knowledge of the future by their entrails. Okay, so what are you saying? So what Serapion is saying, as referred to by Clement of Alexandria, is when she died, she was buried and her body rotted and grass grew on it, but she still had oracle powers. And so that whenever animals grazed upon the grass, they received some kind of insight. But since animals can't talk, the only way they can get the insight is by the reading of the entrails of the animals. So you don't want to keep any animals off the grass there, right? Anyway, so now where is this oracle? Oracle of Siwa. It is situated in the remote desert wastes between Egypt and Libya. It was very important. Accordingly, the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa was closely gauged its antiquity to that of Dodona and Epirus, claiming to be founded by a priestess that was snatched away from Thebes by the Phoenicians. We do find evidence that it goes back this far. According to Herodotus, the image within the oracle temple of Ammon, known by the Greeks as Zeus Ammon, was the image of the deity in the form of the ram. And here is where that Sibyl spoke, right? Now, Yet Quintus Curtius and Diodorus reports that the original form of the oracle was actually a part of a ring, which was embellished with gems, including the elusive C1 emeralds. Herodotus also mentions what he calls a fountain of the sun located at Siwa, which during the hottest part of the day supposedly ran the coldest. But it was very well guarded by the gods. In fact, here we go into a mystery. When Cambyses II, he was the son of Cyrus the Great, took over Egypt, he sought to destroy this oracle of Ammon that had this famous Sibyl. So he sent out an army of 50,000 men to fulfill his wishes. 50,000 men. And they disappeared, never to be seen again. That's right. Some were lost in the western deserts. Pliny tells us that this was because the sacred stone at the temple was touched by sacrilegious hands, which caused a dreaded sandstorm to rage, right? But it's a very dangerous area in the middle of nowhere. Of course, Alexander the Great, rather than wanting to destroy the Sibyl and the accompanying oracle, what he does is before he is about to embark on his Persian campaign, he goes to consult this oracle. Now he thinks that his background is from Perseus or Hercules, right? Maybe Achilles, and he wants to find out. So he goes to Siwa, and what happens is, there's rain, and what happens is all the tracks are being lost. It is said that they are led into the desert and to the oracle by 2 talking snakes. Although there's another version where it's actually 2 crows, and they're led out by the 2 talking snakes or the 2 crows. I prefer the crows. I don't know, although snakes can move pretty fast in the desert. I don't know, maybe it just depends on whatever your perspective. Anyway, he did get there, and he wanted to know, who was his father? Who is my father? Said Alexander the Great, before the Sibyl at this grand oracle. And Ammon Zeus apparently roared, and because he asked the question, is Philip II, my dad Macedonia, is Philip II, is he my dad? He said, no, Philip is not your father. I am your father, says Zeus. Okay, I may sound like Darth Vader. I didn't mean that, but you had this idea. It's like, oh, he's like, wait. So at this oracle site, he's like, wait a second. My father is Zeus. I'm half God. I'm a hero. So not a zero. So there you have it. As a crow flies. No, I gotta stop. So what happens now is which is fascinating, and I would love to take you on a field trip here. You guys want to go out into the Libyan desert? Did you guys know that? Somebody says this is Darth Zeus. Did you guys know that this oracle site still exists? You can still visit it, and it's in the middle of nowhere. Basically, you go through the desert, and there's this little oasis, very small oasis with these palm trees, and there's this huge rock standing out in the middle of the desert, and there's a little village that is around it that's been abandoned since 1926, and you climb up this rock, and at the very top is this oracle site, and it's all there, although the rock is starting to crack, right? And the fear is that this oracle site is going to eventually crumble down below over the cliff. So that would be very sad, but it's all there. So you can actually climb it. The outline of the forecourt with the procession of the gods where they once assembled was still there. The facade's still there. The entry room is still there. So you can actually stand where that Sibyl used to be. I find that fascinating. Okay, so and this Libyan Sybil will be important. So her sayings will become important later on in the story. So again, earmark that. So you got the Jewish Sibyl, remember that. You got the Libyan Sybil, remember that. Okay, now next, you got the Sibyl of the Oracle of Delphi, right? And this is also, this Sibyl was also known as a Pythia. Now, of course, Pausanias specifically calls her a Sibyl because she does what Sibyls do, right? Now, she is, of course, a sacred vessel of Apollo. It is required that she would be an older woman, as all the other Sibyls were, had to live a pure life, and she was selected from the peasants from the surrounding area of Delphi. Now, the Pythia sat on a tripod, and this tripod seat was positioned over an opening in the earth. Now, according to local legend, after Apollo slew the python, right, its huge, monstrous body fell into this fissure, this opening, deep down below. And here, the body of the python, as it decomposed, was believed to turn into fumes that arose and reached up to the Pythia, to this Sibyl. And as she breathed in these fumes, it gave her the ability to communicate with Apollo, right? It's interesting because the word python is derived from the Greek word pythene, which means to rot. Interesting, right? So I have a python. You mean it's called? It means to rot. I actually have a blood python right over here, right here in the house, just just in the other room. But I'm not going to tell Louis that his name means to rot. He'll be very upset. Okay, so we won't say that. So as the Pythia took in the vapors, she then entered into this trance-like state. She became possessed by Apollo, and so began to prophesy. Now, taking a look at the site today, scientists have detected a gas coming from this region that's high in ethylene, which can actually rise from this fissure. And so maybe it's the source of these ecstatic trances, Furthermore, accordingly, the Pythia also drank the waters from the springs of Casotus. And so you have that. And these waters are believed to have special powers, right? Now, while the Pythia said her words, and these words were kind of all over the place, they were translated by nearby priests of the temple in very elegant hexameters, right? So as for some of the recorded oracles, there are many recorded in ancient times. By the way, all the openings of these oracles began with as follows. It starts with, God has ordained. God has ordained. It's interesting that even though the Greeks are polytheistic, it's interesting that it starts with alethein o theos, right? It starts with God has ordained as like a big God. That, by the way, that'll be used later on by Jewish as well as Christian apologists, but we're not there yet, right? So first, the kinds of questions there's questions you can ask that involve life itself. Now, Apollo can answer these questions easily. So about life. The second were questions connected to the power of reasons why things are happening. And those answers were not as simple, and it became very mysterious. And so the idea is Apollo will give you clues, but you're not supposed to know the full measure of what it means. So there we go. So now you have this one. Once again, this will become important later on. So now earmark the third one, right? The Oracle of Apollo at, there we go. You got that in your mind right there at Delphi. Okay, so now we move on to Didyma, and I've been to Didyma. I love that place. I mean, you have an ancient temple dedicated to Apollo that is 3 times larger than the Pantheon in Athens. It's still there. Google, enter. Even though the roof's not there, oh, it's huge. It's enormous. It's a very interesting complex. You know, you have this forecourt. You got then you have an entry area, and then you have these 2 staircases, and on the other side there's an open court, and that's where the oracle used to be. And I've stood just at the exact spot of where I'm going to be describing right now. So at Didyma, by the way, it's called Didyma, which means twins, because this area was sacred to Artemis, Apollo and Artemis. It makes sense. And they've just recently discovered the temple of Artemis there, just down the way. Although in some cases, many will say, well, the temple of Apollo was still connected to Artemis too. So the sacred spring was located in the western part of what's called the Adyton, or the courtyard. And archaeology has revealed that the spring actually shifted positions, the oracle spring, where this Sibyl used to be. So was one position during the Greek and Roman times and another position during the Byzantine era. Now, according to the source of this magical oracle spring was from Mount Mycale, the water flowing beneath the Latmic Gulf and then supposedly rising to the temple of Didyma, right? Also, according to local belief, the sacred spring was the location where Zeus and Leto made love, which would eventually result in the birth of Artemis and Apollo. So where she sprung her maidenhood is where the spring now is located. Well, was located, but it moved during Byzantine times, but still the same courtyard, okay? So they are rumping in this courtyard, very sacred, right? So we know specifically that a prophetess who was known as a Sibyl foretold all the oracles, and we even have inscriptions that talk about that. Now, as for how the oracles were foretold by the Sibyl, I will tell you exactly how. You want details? I'm going to give you details. So early in the morning, the prophetess, or the Sibyl, had to first make a preliminary sacrifice to prepare for her encounter, her ecstatic mantic encounter. Meanwhile, those seeking an oracle gather before in what's called the pronaos, which is the front porch by the east chamber. The requests were specifically written down and handed to somebody known as the prophet, who then went down one of the side chambers to the Adyton and one to the springs with the prophetess awaiting him. As the priestess sat above this sacred spring, she was inspired by it, with her words then interpreted by the listening priest or priestess. So it's the spring that is inspirational as opposed to the vapor at Delphi. Now, Iamblichus, in his mysteries, specifically mentions that the gift of prophecy was bestowed, he quotes though, by vapor from the water, at once breathed in by the prophetesses of Brachendale. He says, revelation set in and the words began to flow. And of course, the Greek word has this idea flowing like a river, flowing, or like a spring, right? She then spoke out the prophecy, and then the prophet listened to it carefully, and he wrote it down. The prophet then rose up the stairs again, returning to the east chamber, with the 3 doors of the west chamber open, allowing the consultants to see the upper back of the wall of the Adyton. This was much like an epiphany window. The prophet crossed over the east chamber and then spoke to the crowd below him, giving the answers to their consultation. So that means that there's a separation between the Sibyl going through by the water, by the spring, having the oracles, and the prophet telling the people. There's still a division. So they really don't see what she's doing, right? Now, Iamblichus describes specifically what happens next, or actually during this period. He says as follows. He says, the woman oracle at Bracandai, whether she is filled with the divine light while holding a wand first conveyed to her by some god, or foretells the future while sitting on an axle, or receive the god by wetting her feet, or a hem in the water, or by inhaling vapor from the water, makes herself ready in all these ways for the reception, and partakes of him without. Now, this is interesting. Okay, so you see there's a combination of things that she does, right? So she is, because what happens here, it sounds like she's doing one or the other, but it turns out that she's doing all of these when you get to the last sentence. So she's basically holding a wand, and then she's sitting on some kind of axle, and then she has her feet in the water along with the hem, part of that lower hem of her dress in the water too. So she is touching the water, and of course there's vapor as well. So, but she has to be touching this water. She has to be feeling this water. It's a tactile sensation, right? To really connect with the energy that's coming from this oracle. He continues, the number of sacrifices and the law of the whole consecration and all the other things done reverently before the oracle singing, so they're singing, the prophetesses bathes and her fast for 3 whole days, and her stay in the Adyton already near the light and delighting in all so much time, having a clear meaning. So she stays there for a while. For all these practices, showing a summoning of the god to be present and his wondrous presence even before she reaches the customary place, and in the very spirit that rises from the spring, they reveal another god spate from that place. Could be read that she held the wand to be filled with divine light, and it keeps on going. So, and the whole magic art. So there you have it. So you have this mystical experience. I'm sorry, sometimes Iamblichus can be a little wordy, and no English translation does very well with Greek. But there you go. So she has to go through the state, but there is a period of 3 days where she's getting herself ready for it. She has to be ready. So Didyma, is that important? Yep, earmark that for later on. So there you have it. Then you have the Cimmerian Sybil, Cimmerian Sybil, and this will figure in also later on. I'll talk more details about it, but this one is located near Lake Avernus, and this is of course connected to actually the word Cimmerian. It connects to the word. I should say this one. No, we won't go there. I want to go through all these etymologies. Otherwise, we'll get lost. What I want to say is that those who were connected to these prophecies were known as the Carmenta. The Carmenta, this is also the name of the Roman goddess of childbirth and prophecy. This name is derived from the Latin carmen, meaning a magical spell or oracle or a song. By the way, it's the root for the word charm, if you're curious. And so we're going to run into this one too. We'll talk about her a little bit more too, but let's keep on going. So let's talk about the next one. And I want to skip because I want to go to the Samian Sybil. The Samian Sybil, it's very confusing. The Samian Sybil is from Samos, which is of course, and she was said to have made the rounds to other places as well, going to Claros and Erythraean and so other places too. But she's known as Photai, which means in Greek indicates the wandering one. The Samian Sybil lived in a cave that's now located in a Panagia Spilani monastery, which is, by the way, also connected to the area where Pythagoras used to hang around. So Pythagoras may have connected to the Sibyl, right? Supposedly, though, this is important. Now, I want to make the Samian Sibyl. Supposedly, this Samian Sibyl proclaimed that there would be the birth of Jesus and that it would occur in a stable. And so this is part of this Christian legacy that we'll be connecting later on. Pausanias makes it clear that she is a near contemporary of the Libyan Samos that was born before the Trojan War. In her poem, she calls herself also the one who is from Artemis and the wedded wife of Apollo, saying too that sometimes that she is Artemis's sister, and sometimes she is Apollo's daughter. So there's this a special kind of really deep connection between Artemis and Apollo with her. According to Pausanias, the Sibyl declared that her mother's line arrived from Mount Ida, while father's side originated for Marpessus. So there you have Pausanias claims that it was this Sibyl who possessed the greater part of her life in Samos, but she again visited various places. And her tomb said as follows. Her inscription says, "Here I am, the plain-speaking Sibyl of Phoebus, hidden beneath the stone tomb, a maiden once gifted with voice, but now forever voiceless, by hard fate doomed to this fetter. But I am buried near the nymphs and this Hermes, enjoying in the world below a part of the kingdom I had then." And so there you have it. So you have this one. Now, you have all these Sibyls. Let's get to the main Sibyl, and we'll see where we're going to go from here. And you're going, wow, that's a lot of Sibyls. Yeah, well, the Sibyl, the first level of Sibyls that become popular during Roman times, it derives originally from the area of Troy, known as the Hellespontine Sibyl, which was established at the Oracle of Paula at Dardania. This is in Trojan territory. According to some traditions, the Sibyl was born in the village of Marpessus near Gergis at the time of Cyrus the Great and Solon, and so from around the 8th century. The Sibylline books attributed to this to the Sibyl were believed to be composed during the 6th century. So it is believed during the 6th century, the first version of the oracles that will later become famous in Rome is composed around Troy, near the base of ancient Mount Ida, the place of the Idaean dactyls. So this collection, so this is where the inspiration is Mount Ida, right? Later, this collection was moved to Erythrae and would eventually, of course, connect to the Erythraean Sibyl. So let's talk about the Erythraean Sibyl. So you have the Trojan Sibyl. Now we're moving to the Erythraean Sibyl. The Erythraean Sibyl was established at the town of, Erythraea, known as one of the 12 Ionian cities. It was understood to be a Minoan establishment. And this Sibyl, his name is claimed to be Herophile. And she supposedly announced the divine parentage of Alexander the Great. And however, you do have legends where she originated from Chaldea, all the way back to the area of the Trojans, right? I mean, the area of the Persians, excuse me. Now, accordingly, how the very first time the word acrostic appears in Greek, and we use this word acrostic in the English language, actually is connected to this Erythraean Sibyl. Now, the Sibyl writes the prophecies on leaves and actually arranges them so that the initial letters of the leaves always form some kind of word. They discovered this cave where she did her work in 1891. It is an artificial cave. It has a water supply there, and a basin was discovered, and various inscriptions as well. And one of the most important inscriptions that you can read right there proclaims as follows of this Sibyl from Erythrae, which of course will eventually become the one connected to Rome. It says as follows: I am Sibyl, uttering oracles, the servant of Phoebus, which is Apollo, the firstborn daughter of a nymph, a naiad. Erythrae is my only home, and Theodorus was my mortal father. The mountain Kisoris carried my birth, the place where I left the womb, and immediately spoke oracles to the mortals. While I was sitting on this rock, I sang for the mortals predictions of future sufferings. I lived for 3 times 300 years. 3 times 300 years. Well, so she's claiming to be 900 years old. I, an unwedded virgin, and I traveled all over the world, but now I am again sitting upon my own dear rock, delighted by this charming spring. I like that. This is a inscription saying, I think this spring is kind of charming. I am glad that the time of which I spoke has come true, the time of which, according to my prophecy, Erythrae will flourish again and will enjoy good order, wealth, and fame through a young Erythraean who comes to his beloved hometown. Okay, so, and she's like, yeah, I'm glad, look, and I, this is the best of times. Erythrae is a ruin today, but but for her it was a great time. Everything's great. Yay! Don't tell her what happened later on. Right? Finding ruins everywhere, and her cave just being lost for long periods of time. But the claim is that she is 900 years old, and she's traveled all over the place. And she seemed to be of good humor, not so crotchety. I mean, she's enjoying the delightful spring all that time. I would get tired of the bubbling brook after all these years, but then again, maybe that's why she traveled around, right? Okay. So, of course, a lot of people, Pausanias actually saw this very inscription, and he said, I think he doubts it's all true. He's all, but there you have it. Always controversy, but there you have it. Okay, so what will happen now is that these oracles, right? These oracles will then go from Erythrae and be brought to Cumae in Italy, where they become very important to the Romans. So it starts at Troy, near Troy, I should say, around Mount Ida, the Trojan territories, where these oracles are written there, and then it's going to Erythrae, and finally then on to Cumae in Rome, and Cumae, and then to Rome. So that's kind of the order of how things work. Okay, so here you go. So now we get to Rome. According to the Romans, the oracles came to Italy, came to Cumae, and the Cumae Sibyl was very powerful in Roman times. Very powerful. According to Pausanias, the next woman to give oracles in this way was called Demo, who came from Cumae. Ovid, by the way, tells what happens to this poor Sibyl who was living here. Her very sad fate. She ended up losing on the side of a deal with Apollo. So Apollo, being Apollo, sought her virginity. And he offered her any wish in exchange. And she says, I pointed to a heap of dust collected there. Foolishly replied, so she's pointing to a bunch of dust. She replied, as many birthdays must be given to me as there are particles of sand. So that's how old I want to be. And then she continues, for I forgot to wish them days of changeless youth. So he gave her long life and offered youth besides, if I would grant his wish. He said, well, you forgot to mention that eternal youth. So, hey, I still want to, be with you. So I'll throw that in, and, for good measure. And she's like, no, I'm not giving up my virginity. Okay, well, then I'll stay true to the first part of my promise. And because of her refusal, he granted her wish in word, but not in essence. And so she lived 1,000 years without eternal youth. So when Aeneas finally met her, the famous hero arriving from Troy, and of course, obviously, also from Carthage and Dido, she was 700 years old and still a virgin. And she didn't look very good because she just kept aging. So according to tradition, she would have sung her prophecies as well as maybe writing them on oak leaves. And then she would leave the oak leaf messages at the mouth of the cave. So the Sibyl, this Sibyl is connected with the famous Aeneas. We've all heard of the great Aeneid, the third great epic connected to the Romans specifically, where Aeneas leaves the burning Ilium and he goes through various travels, and he's supposed to, fulfill his destino, right? That he's going to found a great people, that being Rome. But he kind of made gods angry, and he ends up, thank you Poseidon very much, he ends up in Carthage, which later on become Rome's mortal enemy, and he hangs around Dido, who's the queen there, and they fall in love. But does he choose his passion, or does he choose destino? Does he choose to follow his heart or follow his fate? What he's supposed to do. And of course, he follows his fate, and he leaves Queen Dido. She's so upset. She puts herself on the bed where they made love, and she actually put it on top of a funeral pyre. And as the flames are going up all around her, as she's sitting there in the bed where they made love, she stabs herself. I mean, what a way to go. Pretty dramatic. So very dramatic and traumatic. And so, but he continues on, and he wants to know for sure if it's his destiny to found this great place that's connected to, of course, the Roman progeny. So what happens is that he wants to ask Dad. His dad may know. Well, of course, Dad is dead, so he has to go to the underworld. In order to do that, he has to consult the oracle at Cumae. And this is, of course, one of the reasons why this will become important to the Romans. And of course, the Sibyl there is the very center of this. So the story is told. It's 19 BCE. Virgil writes this epic, the Aeneid. He refers to the cave, saying that where this Sibyl is, saying it has hundreds of openings. And so here, the Trojan warrior Aeneas sought to learn his destiny from the Sibyl. That, fighting his father in Hades, wanted to ask him directly. And so what he does is that he arrives at the river Styx. So he goes down. He arrives at the river Styx, the great dividing line between, the mortals and the dead. Charon, the grisly ferryman, is there, waiting along the banks of the river, ready to take them over to the other side. Of course, Charon is not sure he wants to, because, there's one small little hiccup. Aeneas is alive, So, and so what happens is the Sibyl intervenes. It says that, well, Aeneas is not just any mortal, but he is the son of Venus, and tries to bargain with Charon. So Charon will ferry him over to the other side. His pedigree is important, and also he gives him some gold. She kind of bribes, Sibyl bribes him. And so, satisfied, of course, Charon cleanses his vessel of all the ghosts that were supposed to be taken across, and takes Aeneas. And so they arrive on the other side. And the Sibyl, by the way, is still there. So the Sibyl is this guide, and a very important guide as they go into the underworld. Again, this is going to be important later on. They run into Cerberus. This is the snaky-headed, three-headed watchdog So, and so what happens is that she basically calms this three-headed dog, giving them like doggy treats. So that kind of calms things down. And then what happens is they go to the various levels. So basically the realm of the innocents. Uh, that's where so basically in Romans believe that if you're a baby and you die, you immediately go to this realm of the innocents, and then you're just simply reincarnated again in another soul. And then you go, also, this is the place that was located of those people who were accused as guilty of a crime that they never committed. And so and they receive capital punishment. And so what happens is you go on this level, and because you're really innocent, you are just immediately reincarnated again. So they're not there very long. Just then the second level of Hades, this is the suicides, right? Oh, by the way, Aeneas runs into Dido. Dido was not in exactly a great mood to see him, and so she just kind of turned his back and was silent. He didn't realize that she had stabbed himself on top of a funeral pyre while laying on the bed where they made love the first time and many times after that. So, you can kind of get where she's coming from there. The third level, you have the mourning fields, right? This is where the soldiers who fought, who are slowly kind of moldering and going away. And eventually you get down, the Sibyl leads them down to the great judge, Ramadanus, the son of Zeus. And he says, basically, on the left-hand side, you got Tartarus, and which is not a good place to go. And hears terrible sounds of like whips and dragging of chains, right? Groans of spirits and perpetual agony. It's a terrible place. And, you get stuck going there if you do a few things. For example, the sin of desertion, if you desert, leave your troops, you're going there. Defrauding an inheritance, accepting bribes, patricide, incest, adultery. That's where you're going. And in this place, there is fire, there is brimstone, and there's drowning, everything else. It's not a good place to go. You don't want to go here. So, in fact, what happens here is on the other side, you have Elysium. And Elysium is a beautiful place. It's a paradise. It's where you want to go. It's the happy place. So what happens concerning Tartarus, I want to read this. Concerning Tartarus, it goes as follows. It says, nor death itself can wholly wash their stains, but long contracted filth ever in the soul remains. The relics of vice they wear, and spots of sin obscene in every face appear. For this are various penances enjoined, and some are hung to bleach upon the wind, some plunged in waters, others purged in fires, till all the dregs are drained and all the rust expires. All have their manes, and those manes bear the few so cleansed to those abodes repair, and breathe in ample fields the soft Elysian air. Then are they happy, when by length of time the scurf is worn away of each committed crime. No speck is left of their habitual stains, but the pure ether of their soul remains. But when 1,000 rolling years are past, so long their punishments and penances last, while droves of minds are, by the driving God, compelled to drink the deep Lethean flood, in large forgetful draughts to steep the cares of their past labors and their irksome years, the unremembering of its former pain, the soul may suffer mortal flesh again. So what's happening here is basically, if you're in this place called Tartarus, you're going through purgatoria. That's right, the purging, purgatoria. That's where this word, this concept comes from. And so you're purged. Now, some are there, as you heard, a short amount of time, because if you're not too bad, and you get transferred over to Elysium. Sometimes you have to be there for the full 1,000 years, even really bad. But at the very end, everybody's released, not only from Tartarus after 1,000 years, but from Elysium. And they're all driven to the waters of life. And the Lydian flood that mentions this. So you drink from these waters. Lathe actually means oblivion, right? But these waters are seen to be so tempting, right? So the more you drink from these waters, the more you forget your past life, until getting your fill, as you drink, you forget everything and you're ready to be reincarnated as a newborn babe. There you have it, you know. So, of course, the belief system, there's the Orphic Mysteries tells you how, you know, when you get to that position, don't go to the lathe spring. Go instead to the lake of memory. It's to the right of the palm tree. And when you drink from the lake of memory, you'll remember everything. And once you remember everything, I guess what happens, you may be even free from this mortal coil and be released into the stars beyond. That's a good news. Anyway, so what happens is, by the way, the Sibyl is still here watching all of this. She's the guide. She's the guide, right? Kind of a big responsibility. That's why she's so important as it goes into, you know, the Roman period of the empire, right? You know, so in fact, Anchises, Aeneas's father, shows his son the souls by this river who are destined to become the leaders of Rome through his family line, under the condition, of course, that he fulfills his destiny. In fact, it goes as follows. I'll just finish this up. He says, "Now fix your sight and stand intent to see your Roman race and Julian progeny. The mighty Caesar waits his vital hour, impatient for the world, and grasps his promised power. But next behold, the youth of form divine, Caesar himself exalted in his line. Augustus, promised oft and long foretold, sent to the realm that Saturn ruled of old, born to restore a better age of gold." And there it is. Wow. Guess what? The famous cave described by Virgil, where the Sibyl was, survives. What? It survives. It's still there. What? Yeah. Oh, whoa. Yeah. So you want to, yeah, it was, you know, so let's talk about it, right? So you know, Strabo talks about it a little bit here. First of all, Strabo is kind of given his tour, and as he's given his tour of the region of Campania, he talks about this cave, but he also talks about another one that's connected to the other Sumerian oracle. So he's kind of floating around, and he's first of all he's saying, okay, so he's talking about first of all the Sumerian oracle at Lake Avernus, and he says a few words about it. I'll just kind of say this real quick. He says that at Lake Avernus, he mentions that this is where there's an oracle of the dead that was located here, and he mentioned that Odysseus visited here. He mentioned the fact that the natives used to add the fable that all birds that fly over this lake fall into the water, being killed by the vapors. You know, he talks about the fact that you have which is really fascinating. I do want to talk about this, that those people that the Sumerians had in charge of the oracle, along with the Sibyl, lived in an underground complex. He says that he lived in underground houses, and it is through tunnels that they visited one another back and forth, and also admit strangers to the oracle, which is situated, he says, far beneath the earth. And they live on what they get from mining, and from those who consult the oracle, and from the king of the country, who has appointed them fixed allowances. And those who live about the oracle have an ancestral custom that no one should see the sun, but should go outside the cavern only during the night. So anyway, yikes. So there is this underground, this particular Sumerian oracle site, even though it's not the one at Cumae, what happens is it thrives for a period of time. And Strabo mentions this, but it is abandoned. And many scholars will say what happens is that the focus then shifts from Lake Aventine to the Oracle of Cumae, got it, which is nearby. So you have this shifting. This earlier one is underground. So this newer one has to be underground too, as well. So let's take a look at this one. Now, if you can ever have a chance to visit this oracle site, just think about the Sibyl that used to be here. But this particular cave of the Sibyl comes from the 6th century BCE. So it is later. And it does have many entrances, that was talked about. And you enter into it. So it's 5 meters high. So it's it's kind of not that I bumped my head, and I'm not 5 meters, I'm not that tall. I'm joking. It's pretty tall. So what happens is that you go through the entrance and it slopes gradually. And there are 500 niches on each side of the wall that once held lamps to illuminate this passageway. The first part of this tunnel goes for about 270 feet. And then you reach today a parting of ways, with one tunnel remaining straight, leading to the inner sanctuary, which is 120 feet away, and another going down 290 feet to reach this muddy pond that was believed to be the river Styx. And it kind of dead ends there. Now, the passage that goes directly to the upper sanctuary is directly oriented towards the sunset at the time of the summer solstice. So you can see that the Sibyl, observed this solar event, right? Now the passage descending went, as I said, to this Styx muddy pond, and this is where the priests dwelled. They dwelled on this other side. They dwelt by this muddy pond. The Sibyl was there, and there's like a little landing there as well. But it doesn't go any further. I mean, does it go to the underworld? It doesn't seem to go any further. But the belief is that those who are visiting the Sibyl, as well as those who are orchestrating things, made sure that their visitors were, how do I say this, in a state of mind where they would think that they are entering the underworld through this entranceway. So you get my drift. So probably some kinds of drugs, mushrooms, other kinds of things, just to get them in the mood, right? So there you have it. So what happens now, the earliest reference to the command Sibyl dates back to the 3rd century BCE. And so we have that. And but we do have, it seemed to be a tourist attraction too. We do have, from the 4th century CE, we do have a reference to it. And I'll read this too. He says, you can easily learn the true religion, at least in part. So this person's writing in the 4th century CE, so the 300s, about this cave. Learn about the true religion, at least in part, from the ancient Sibyl. By virtue of powerful inspiration, she teaches you through oracles things that seem to come close to the teachings of the prophets. This is a Christian who's writing this. She is said to have come from Babylon and to be the daughter of Borissus, the author of the Chaldean history. She is said to have moved, I don't know how, to the region of Campania, and to have uttered there her oracles in a certain place called Cumae. This is the city that is located 6 miles from the city of Baiae, where the hot springs of Campania are located. When we arrived in the city, we saw a certain place where we discerned a large basilica hewn out of one rock, a very big and very admirable piece of work. People who received the local tradition from their own ancestors told us that this was the place where the prophetesses used to utter her oracles. In the middle of the basilica, they showed us 3 cisterns hewn out of the same rock. They told us that after these had been filled with water, she used to take a bath in them. And having put on her garment, she used to stride into the innermost room of the basilica, which was also hewn out of the same rock. sitting on a throne on a high platform in the middle of the room. She uttered her oracles. When we were in the city, we learned these things ourselves from the tourist guides. They showed us also the places she prophesied, and a flask made of bronze in which they said her remains were kept. So this Sibyl, right, was, even though she's no longer around, it was a tourist attraction during the 300s CE. Yeah, you always have tourists. Well, now, the most popular story related to the Sibyl of Cumae, beyond the one told connected to Aeneas, which we just mentioned, occurred during the reign of Tarquinius Superbus. Tarquinius Superbus, what a name, So this is the last Etruscan king out of the 7 kings, and for good reason, with a name like Tarquinius Superbus. I mean, a name like that would go to your head. Anyway, so what happens is this: around 500 BCE, this venerable Sibyl approached this renowned, very haughty king with 9 books of her prophecy, a sacred collection from the wisest prophets and seers of antiquity. The Sibyl told the king that he could have this collection of great wisdom, but it's going to be a high price. When the king heard how much it was, even though in case the entire wisdom of the gods and fate of humanity, he refused to pay up. He wished for a more moderate price. No, I'm not going to pay, not at all, for these works. So he refused to do so. She had 9 books, right? Without hesitating, the Sibyl immediately burned 3 of the books, then proceeded to offer the remaining 6 books the same price. Again, Tarquinius Superbus refused. Then the Sibyl threw 3 more books onto the fire. And then she says, and there's only 3 left now, and says, are you going to pay? And she wanted the same price. He realized that he's in big trouble, so he paid the price. He paid the price that she asked for the 3, even though he could have got the 9. So those were erased. But that's the price for hubris. So what happens then? She received her pay, and then accordingly, she disappeared from amongst men, according to Dionysius. She disappeared. So her wisdom is now given. It's written. These oracles were believed vested with incredible power, foretelling the future of the city of Rome. They were stored on the Capitoline Hill in Rome. At first, 2 patricians were in charge of guarding and maintaining these books, these oracles from antiquity. Now, references to the oracles are found in many Latin sources. Now, for the original Sibylline oracles that date before the destruction of the Temple of Jupiter in 82 BCE, Livy proves to be the most prominent source. According to the oracles, were consulted in 399 BCE following a pestilence. And so what happens here? They're consulted. What do? We have a pestilence. What's going on here? And the result was what's called a lectisternium ceremony. So they consult her, they consult the oracle, and she says, you got to do, because of this pestilence, you got to do this lectisternium ritual. And what is this? So lectum means to spread, and sternum, of course, the drape. So it's the draping of the couch ritual. So what happens is that basically the divine images were created using bundles of sacred herbs. They were all tied together, and they were made into the form of a head as well as a body. The head was covered by a waxen mask, so it kind of resembled that of a bust, right? And then it was laid upon a couch with the left arm resting on a cushion. And so it looked like it's basically a resting, inclined bag of sacred herbs meant to look like a deity. The couch was then set out into the open street, and a meal was placed before it on a table. Now, in the case of this event, however, the oracle said that 3 couches were to be prepared for 3 pairs of gods, one for Apollo and Latona, the second for Hercules and Diana, the third for Mercury and Neptune. Interesting, they have these 2 gentlemen together. The feast was to last for 8 days, and there you have it. So basically, for this pestilence to go away, you gotta feed the gods and make these representations made out of herbs, put masks on them, have them reclining on couches, put them before a low table, put them in front of your house, and woo, the pestilence will pass you by. In 367 BCE, they added more officials. 5 patricians and 5 plebeians were then guarding the books. Now, what happens is that when they read these works, the predictions of the future, the prophecies were kept quiet because they don't want people to know the future in public. But when it came to what you're supposed to do for the immediate situation, then of course they would use it. So basically, these prophecies would talk about all these events are supposed to happen and what you're supposed to do with each event. But they're not going to tell you. They're not going to, those who are watching these oracles are not going to tell you what they are ahead of time. But when that occasion comes about, they'll tell you what is prescribed for that occasion. You guys got that? Well, this becomes really important because accordingly, you have what happens here is that using these works, Greek religion, because all it's on Greek religion enters in by way of these oracles, and as a result really helps to create an amalgamation between Roman religion and Greek religion. When, of course, a plague occurs, they consulted this again. At one point, Livy states that a shower of stones rained down and darkness filled the sky during daylight in 345 BCE, and so the oracles were opened. And so rituals were said to happen then, a special holiday. Pestilence hit Rome again in 295, and so with even the army of Appius Claudius struck by lightning, the oracles were consulted with a temple of Venus built near the Circus Maximus. In fact, what happens is oftentimes the oracle is going to ask for a temple to be built, and that's going to appease whatever terrible disaster is about to occur. Well, one of the most dramatic events concerns the oracles during the Second Punic War. And so the recommendation comes about that in order for Rome to be safe from Carthage during the Second Punic War, the image of the goddess Cybele had to be brought from Pessinus to Rome. That's where the prediction came from, is from these oracles. So they brought this goddess, this foreign Asiatic goddess from Pessinus to Rome, and yes, they survived. Well, okay, so you have this oracle being consulted. So you're thinking, okay, so we got it, we're done. Well, guess what happens? What happens is in 82 BCE, these sacred books were destroyed in the burning of the temple of Jupiter. The temple of Jupiter burned to the ground. It burned these oracles. What are we going to do? We've lost these oracles. And panic occurred. And then they thought, wait a second. A Sibyl is a Sibyl, right? You get where we're going with this one? So, so to compensate for this loss, these various representatives were sent all around the known world in 76 BCE to find some of the sources for this lost collection of wisdom. Tacitus mentions this. Accordingly, then they created a brand new oracles of Sibyl that came from Troy, Erythraean, Samos, Sicily, and of course Africa, which is the one that is the oracle of Ammon. So wait a second. So wait, those, you getting this? Are you guys following this? So that means is that, remember all those other Sibyls I mentioned? Well, this one burned. So what they did is they quickly grabbed the prophecies from these other places. They bundled it up together and they made a new set of orders. So by the way, nobody ever tells you that. It's not very clear, even in scholarship, that, hey, we have a new group of oracles to be consulted. Yes, and now you know why we went through all those, because now they're all getting rolled in. This new collection was deposited in the new temple of Jupiter, and with other sayings from the Tiburtine Sibyl as well added in. And so there you have it. Okay, so now its predictions are being used again over and over again. I can't mention them all because there's quite a list here. I'll just give you a kind of an outline here. In 55 BCE, when Romans deliberated sending a force to restore Ptolemy the 12th to the throne of Egypt, lightning struck the statue of Jupiter on the Alban Mount. Immediately the oracles were consulted with one reading: if the king of the Egypt comes to you asking for assistance, refuse him not your friendship, yet do not grant him any army, or else you will have to toil in danger. These are the kinds of oracles you will get. In 44 BCE, Suetonius records that the Sibylline prediction that only a king could triumph over Parthia, which then fueled rumors that Caesar, leader of the then republic, was aspiring for kingship. And guess what? He was. Augustus Caesar decided to move these oracles from the temple of Jupiter to the temple of Apollo on the Palatine Hill, where it still was being consulted. When the Tiber River flooded much of the lower parts of Rome in 15 CE, one of the priests suggested consulting the books, but Emperor Tiberius actually said, don't do it. So you have it being consulted over a period of time. Well, so what's going to happen to these? You're thinking, is there going to be a moratorium on it? Yeah. So what happens now, we do have pieces, fragments of this oracle that has survived. You're thinking, fragments, wait, we're going to lose these too? Yeah. So, but there you have it. In fact, there's we have fragments in Phlegon, preserves some of them, but I don't have time to read them. I'll just read the first part, and I'm going to stop. He says, this is a quote from the original, the second group of oracles, which are, by the way, will also be destroyed. What? Yeah. So he says, when a longest span of life for humans passes, having journeyed a cycle of 110 years, remember, Romans, even escapes your notice, remember all these things: to sacrifice to the immortal gods of the field along the boundless waters of the Tiber at its narrowest point. And then, of course, it goes on to specific measures of how exactly to do it. In fact, he says, this is so interesting, I'm sorry. He says, when night comes upon the earth and the sun has hidden its own light, perform sacrifice of dark sheep and goats to the all-generated Morai, and also appease childbirth promoting Erythraean with offerings in the proper way. In that place, let the black sow swollen with piglets be sacrificed to Gaia, and let all white bulls be led to the altar of Zeus by day, not by night. For to the Uranian gods, sacrifices are performed in daylight. Let Hera's shining temple receive a young steer from you, and let Phoebus Apollo, who also is called Helios, receive equal victims, Leto's son, and goes on and on. I mean, it's very long, but yeah, so we do have fragments. Well, you're thinking, okay, well, that's good news, right? Yes. Meanwhile, you have again this pagan oracles, but you also have a third group of oracles. I told you it gets to be a labyrinth. A third group. Yeah. So what happens is, and here you go, the first group of pagan oracles was so influential to the Romans, used as authoritative, that Hellenistic Jews living in Alexandria were fascinated by it, and they decided to make up their own oracles that are posing as pagan oracles, but focus in on monotheism and also heighten the importance of Jewish ideas and Judaism in general. You guys got it? So it's running parallel to the first set of oracles. It's gaining steam. And this is happening during the 3rd into the 2nd centuries BCE. So it's clothed in a sense, in this pagan sense, right? Now, this Jewish oracle, of course, will connect to the legends. Remember, we talked about the stories of this Persian Sibyl that is also a Jewish Sibyl. So what they will do is connect with this idea and say that is the true source. We are the true source. That's where it came from. So these ancient pagan ones, the first set, are basically copying us because we came up with the idea in the first place, and we have the true ones, right? This Jewish Sibyl often complains that she is exhausted by the mighty spirit of God, but that she is compelled by his command to continue her utterances, his utterances. She is very conscious of her divine mission to be the light to the heathen, preparing the path of men. She circulates the divine code of ethics and explains the ancient history of the Jews to the Gentiles, whom she tries to familiarize with monotheism, retaining some of the concepts of Greek mythology, merely to lend a nice little overcovering there. And so you have now these works starting to grow. Also, they're filled with messianic prophecies. So we see that. Well, guess what's going to happen? No. What's going to happen? Well, obviously, Christianity grows up. Christianity arrives and they go, you know what? We like this authoritative Jewish oracles connected to the Sibyls. So we are going to take these Sibyls, Sibylline Oracles, and we are going to interpolate Christian ideas into them. And so this set of oracles becomes Christianized. Meanwhile, remember the pagan one? Well, meanwhile, that one is burned, right? Remember, the Temple of Jupiter. And so contemporaneous to now the Christian ones is, of course, the second group of the pagan ones. Here, wow, that's a lot of oracles. I know. And again, scholars don't know how to explain that. You can see how this can get really confusing. Well, at first, the Christian apologists will quote from strictly the Jewish one at first. And then eventually, Christians will adopt it as their own, and it will be a competing oracle to the pagan one, or I should say the second pagan one. Justin Martyr will quote from it. Theophilus of Antioch will quote from this Jewish becoming a Christian oracle. Okay, and you're thinking, okay, so we take a look at this oracle. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but the Jewish oracle, as we have it today, it really is a combination between Christian and Jewish influences. So it really is. Let me take a look at it. So what happens is, so you look at the books. Oh, so I'm trying here. Okay, so you look at the first of all, the first book. Really, a lot of it is very Jewish. Has like a Jewish eschatology mixed with Stoic conceptions. Book 3 is very Jewish. It's very, very Jewish. In fact, taking a look at the references, it must have been written between 140 to 124 BCE. It talks about the building of the Tower of Babel and the dispersion of the various peoples and quarrels amongst the three kings, Kronos, Titan, and Japetus. Interesting, huh? And of course, there's biblical material that's kind of thrown in there in various places. And so you have these oracles kind of going. Now, what will happen is that towards the end, they will become more and more Christian in ideals. And they'll add Christian elements. Well, and you're thinking, well, what about the pagan oracles? What happened to them? Well, unfortunately, what happened to them is a general by the name of Stilicho, in the year 405, burned the second group of pagan Sibylline oracles. He burned them. And so they don't exist anymore. Got it? So now the second one. So all we have left of the second group are just a bunch of quotations from ancient scholars. We no longer have that one. Well, now that that one's destroyed, as a result of that, this Jewish-Christian one gains ground and becomes more and more popular as we enter into the Byzantine period. And then it starts to disappear. During the Middle Ages, it becomes less popular, but during the Renaissance, suddenly interest comes again with the Jewish Christian oracles. In fact, Michelangelo was very much into it. And he, in fact, in the Sistine Chapel, in his composition on prophets and Sibyls, which is painted between 1508 to 1512, there are figures in the vault of this chapel that show the 12 prophetic figures that are supposedly talked about the coming of Christ. Okay, so, and they are as follows: Jonah, Jeremiah, the Persian Sibyl, Ezekiel, the Erythraean Sibyl, Joel, Zechariah, the Delphic Sybil, Isaiah, the Cumaean Sibyl, Daniel, and the Libyan Sybil. So wait a second. So when we get to the Renaissance, these Sibyls are viewed as predicting the arrival of Christ. Now, what will happen is we take a look, and it turns out the Samos one, remember the one from Samos? It's the one that supposedly predicted the birth of Christ. It predicted what is going to happen in his life. And then it predicted aspects that they said they got confused with Peter about going to Rome and so forth. So what will happen is these oracles, even the pagan ones, were considered so important when it came to Christian apologetics that they just could not let this idea go. And so they lost the original one. So what they did is they just made new ones, and a new fancy Christian one that's based on the Jewish ones. And so you have this interesting labyrinth. But what do we gain from this? What do we know? What we gain is a story where people, they so want to know the future. They want to know, they want to have it all written out. They want it all predicted, and they want it easy. And something like these oracles appeal to some kind of higher authority. And the fact that this knowledge of the future is known, that it's coming about, gives people a sense of comfort. It's a coping mechanism that, things are dire. There's problems going on. There's pestilence. There's a war going on. There's insecurity. But good news, we have this book that knows about the future, and it knows, here it is, that the future is going to continue on for a while longer. See, it gives us that confidence. So we just simply consult in this book given by special knowledge to tell us, what we should do right now. We want to know what to do. A lot of scholars sit around going, what probably happened is that there's a crisis going on, and the various people who are connected to the Sibyl are thinking, well, we got to figure this one out. And so they're going, okay, let's make something up. And so they'll write an oracle piece that will fit the anxiety at that time. and then they polish it all out, and then they tell the people, and they find confidence in it. Because when you take a look, even with the Judeo-Christian oracles of Sibyl, they go on forever, and in many ways, they resemble various instances in time, specific ones. Like, for example, the Jewish one will specifically mention this destruction of Pompeii by Mount Vesuvius. And they will say the reason why that happened in 79 CE is because Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. So see, this is what you get. And so you're going to see these episodes woven throughout these oracles, which makes it very rich in looking at the anxieties of the people at that time, what they were worried about, as well as various historical episodes and what they believe could have happened or should have happened. And so there you have it, these oracles. So it looked like at first I was talking about one set of oracles, and it turned out I'm talking about, well, 1, 2, 3, that turns into number 4. And that's quite a bit to cover. These are part of the arcane mysteries that most people today don't know about, but during the Renaissance and the early modern period were still looked at as something that was very important, especially when it comes to apologetics. It seemed to assert in many ways that our belief system our Christianity was preordained even from an earlier period of time. But what is lost in so many different ways is some of the mystery and magic of some of these texts that are forever lost. And we only get various insights into the anxieties of the era from a pagan perspective. But those insights are amazing indeed. So thank you so much. Covered a lot of materials. I'm done. I'm going to drink some waters of Lade and forget everything. Okay, I'm forgetting more. What's my name again? Thank you.